Tonight, the ACT's finances are deeper in the red than expected, but the Chief Minister still insists a surplus is on the horizon. Also tonight, the federal government secures support for laws setting minimum employment standards for gig workers. The search intensifies for a Victorian mother who vanished after going for a run as her family pleads for help. And the Brumbies back rower awarded Australian rugby's highest honour. Yorma, good evening and welcome to ABC News. I'm James Glenday, coming to you from Ngunnawal country, and we also acknowledge other people and families with connection to the lands of the ACT. Well, the Chief Minister, Andrew Barr, insists the ACT government is still on a trajectory to a surplus, despite a larger than expected deficit revealed in the mid-year budget review this afternoon. Treasury officials say some of the causes are out of their hands, like reduced payroll tax revenue and an undercount of the capital's population. And expenses have increased as well, including more spending on health. But in an election year, the government's economic credentials are under close scrutiny.
For many Canberrans, how much they've been spending compared to previous summers is a mixed bag.
A lot less when I'm earning less. Living expenses are higher, so you're putting away for that.
Personally, I think it's stayed the same for me.
Definitely more, because my two children have both bought houses, and so we've been buying stuff for them to the houses. You know, the bank of mum and dad has been severely taxed.
Nationally, retail turnover has been trending downwards since late 2022, and that's been hitting the ACT's budget bottom line.
We have, like other states and territories, experienced the impact of declining consumer confidence and consumer spending through a reduction in revenue from our single largest revenue source, which is the goods and services tax.
A reduction in outsourcing to contractors by the federal government has also affected payroll tax revenue, while the ACT's share of the GST pool took a further hit from what the Chief Minister thinks is an underestimate of Canberra's population.
Essentially, we need to do better than people's Medicare addresses, because that is clearly not a true indicator of movement internally within Australia.
At budget time last year, the government had forecast a deficit of $443 million for this financial year. That's now blown out by $340 million to $783 million in the red. But they're still expecting a return to surplus by mid-2026. Net debt for this financial year has increased from $7.3 billion to $7.4 and will continue to rise to $11.6 billion over the forward estimates, further adding to the desire for interest rate cuts.
We did take advantage of the COVID era record low levels. But we do obviously need to be prudent around borrowing for infrastructure.
There was stronger than expected economic growth in the last financial year, and gross state product is also predicted to be higher than previously thought, though the opposition's outlook isn't so optimistic.
Time when thousands of Canberrans are facing a huge cost of living crisis, we see the proof of Andrew Barr's poor economic management and flippant disregard for taxpayers' dollars.
The Chief Minister will hand down his next full budget in June. Harry Frost, ABC News, Canberra.
New rights and protections are on the way for hundreds of thousands of workers through the biggest update to Australia's industrial laws in a decade. The Senate's passed a sweeping package of changes that'll safeguard conditions for casuals, truckies and low-paid rideshare drivers. But customers who order a lift or a meal are being warned they'll have to foot some of the bill.
Most days, Utsav Batari spends 10 hours behind the wheel as a delivery driver. He's a gig worker, working long hours and often for not much pay.
There has been instances where I've worked 100 hours and barely made $1,000.
The amount of work he gets fluctuates, and how much he earns depends on which app he is working for.
We do not know how many hours we're going to work next week and how much we're going to make.
We've got workers in the gig economy that are literally rushing to their deaths.
Now, new laws are aiming to bring minimum standards to the gig economy.
Gig workers in Australia will now know that Australia is truly a country where you don't have to rely on tips to make ends meet.
The new laws apply to gig workers, like drivers with Uber and Menulog. For the first time, the Fair Work Commission will be able to set minimum standards, like a base rate of pay. That might mean delivery drivers get the same pay per minute, no matter which app they work for.
The Australian industrial relations system has modernised for a modern type of work.
Some of the major gig economy players backed the new laws, but acknowledge they'll lead to higher prices.
The exact price rises that come from the changes that will be announced today will ultimately be determined by the numbers that are set by the Fair Work Commission.
The laws passed the Senate this afternoon, wrapped in a bill with changes for casuals, truckies, and a new right to disconnect, and backed by enough of the crossbench, but strongly opposed by the coalition.
If you thought as a business in Australia you were drowning under a deluge of red tape, the bad news is it is about to get worse.
Getting this tranche of legislation through the Senate is certainly a political win for the government. It's second in only a few days after the coalition folded and backed the Prime Minister's revised income tax cuts. Industrial relations can make for difficult politics, but Labor appears to have figured out how to negotiate with an often fractious Senate crossbench. There are new battles looming, however, in housing, education, and a budget only a few months away. Tom Lowry, ABC News, Canberra.
The family of missing Victorian woman Samantha Murphy has made a heart-wrenching plea in the hope of finding the 51-year-old mother alive. After 5 days of searching, police are yet to uncover any strong leads into her disappearance, but say there are no suspicious circumstances at this stage. Laura Mayers reports from Ballarat.
Distraught and in tears, Jess Murphy is living a nightmare.
Mum's a really strong woman and she's far too determined to give up this fight. I know she's out there somewhere, so if you could please continue to search for her, to give us something to work with, we'd really appreciate it.
Summoning all the courage she could muster, the eldest daughter of Ballarat East woman Samantha Murphy issued a plea for her return after going missing 5 days ago, speaking directly to her mother.
Mum, we love you so much and we miss you and we need you at home with us.
Samantha's husband Mick was by his daughter's side, struggling to comprehend what's happened to his wife.
People just don't vanish into thin air. Someone's got to know something, you know, whether it be any little thing that you might think's relevant, just call the police.
Police say the mother of three left her home just after 7 a.m. on Sunday for a run in the Wawukarung Regional Park. Their search for Samantha has now expanded to the suburbs on the outskirts of the park and are looking for CCTV from Sunday morning.
Certainly if they find anything of interest on the footage, we'd like them to let police know that.
A routine runner in the area, the 51-year-old's disappearance is out of character, but police say no suspicious circumstances have been identified at this stage.
And we're keeping an open mind and considering all possibilities, and we're being extremely thorough and methodical with that investigation.
But potential leads have so far met dead ends. CCTV thought to be of Samantha running past a property has been discounted, as have items found in nearby bushland.
Police say they're working through an enormous amount of information received from the public. There are still dozens of community members out helping in the search, vowing they won't stop until she's found.
We just need everyone to keep looking. It may be day 5, but Sam is the most strongest person, both mentally and physically.
Just keep going, keep encouraging each other. I know that it's really hard to lose hope at the minute, but I do believe that we will find her.
Hope her family is clinging on to.
Please come home soon. I can't wait to see you and to give you the biggest hug when I do.
Laura Mayers, ABC News, Ballarat.
Prince William has spoken for the first time since his father was diagnosed with cancer, thanking the public for their support and well wishes. The heir to the throne returned to royal duties after time away to look after his wife and is preparing to take on an increased workload while the King undergoes treatment. The monarch has also issued his first statement since announcing his illness as he recuperates in private.
Prince William is back at work after 3 weeks away from the spotlight, facing the public for the first time since news of the King's cancer battle.
We really appreciate everyone's kind messages, thank you.
This charity gala for London's air ambulance was personal. The Prince used to be one of their pilots. He was all smiles as he rubbed shoulders with guests, including Hollywood star Tom Cruise. The heir to the throne acknowledged his family's difficult month. His wife is still recovering from abdominal surgery in January.
I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you also for the kind messages of support for Catherine and for my father, especially in recent days. It means a great deal to us all. It's fair to say the past few weeks have had a rather medical focus, so I thought I'd come to an air ambulance function to get away from it all.
Earlier in the day, the Prince handed out state honours at an investiture ceremony at Windsor Castle. With Catherine not expected back at work before Easter, the Prince and the Queen Consort will take on many of the King's public duties. The months ahead will put pressure on the royal households as they try to fulfil all of their duties and maintain a strong public presence. The King has made his first public statement since his cancer announcement, marking the 50th anniversary of independence in Grenada, one of the Commonwealth realms. I can only say how sorry I am that I cannot be with you in person to mark this momentous milestone. The monarch will now hold his weekly audience with the British Prime Minister over the phone.
I know the thoughts of the House and the country are with the King and his family. We wish His Majesty a speedy recovery and look forward to him resuming his public-facing duties in due course.
Meanwhile, Prince Harry is heading home to the US after spending a little more than 24 hours in England. He had a brief meeting with the King yesterday, but there was no royal reunion with his brother. Away from the public and press, the King is now recuperating from treatment at his Sandringham estate. Isabella Higgins, ABC News, London.
A ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas has been rejected by a defiant Benjamin Netanyahu. The Israeli Prime Minister forcefully dismissed Hamas's terms, vowing to fight until a complete victory has been achieved.
Hopes for an imminent humanitarian pause dashed.
I would like to emphasize again that there is no solution other than total victory.
An unwavering Benjamin Netanyahu calling Hamas's proposal for a truce delusional and restating only absolute defeat would ensure Israel's security.
We are on the path of total victory. Victory is within reach.
Hamas's proposal was in response to a ceasefire offer devised by mediators from Qatar, Egypt and the United States. But Israel said no to the terms.
Haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, a few weeks.
Welcome.
Despite the rejection, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken remains hopeful.
While there are some clear non-starters in Hamas's response, we do think it creates space for agreement to be reached.
As talks stalled, bombing intensified, with Israel making a push into the southern tip of Gaza.
I'm especially alarmed by reports that the Israeli military intends to focus next on Rafah, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been squeezed in a desperate search for safety.
The US was bracing for this truce setback, predicting that Israel may publicly denounce the mediation as part of its negotiating tactics. But the Americans were hoping to pull off a diplomatic success because without a ceasefire in Gaza, risks remain that a wider conflict in this region will continue to escalate.
As in Iraq, where anger is growing. The United States launched a drone strike in Baghdad, killing a senior commander of an Iran-backed militia group. This, the Pentagon says, was in response to the deaths of 3 American soldiers in neighbouring Jordan. While the campaign of strikes seeks to deter, the threat of retaliation attacks is very real. John Lyons, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Back home, and Canberrans with experience of end-of-life care will be invited to brief a new task force to ensure voluntary assisted dying services in the ACT meet community expectations. Legislation is being considered by an Assembly committee and is expected to pass later this year. A group of experts and stakeholders will consult with the broader community to ensure voluntary assisted dying services are fit for purpose. But the ACT government says it will not include staunch opponents of voluntary assisted dying.
While there's not a lot of point in engaging with people who are just going to say we shouldn't be doing this, it is very important to engage with people who have expressed concerns about the way in which voluntary assisted dying will be implemented.
ACT police officers are being moved out of the city police station because of water damage from recent rain. Some staff will be moved from the building while works to rectify damage take place over the next few weeks. ACT Policing says no public-facing operations or the watch house will be affected by the move. A spokesperson wouldn't confirm how many officers have been affected by the change. The police union, which says it's been raising concerns about the state of the building for years, and the opposition, say the ACT government has dropped the ball and must improve facilities for frontline workers. Now, Kirtley Beale's barrister has labelled his sexual assault accuser a manipulative woman who made a false allegation amid problems in her relationship. But prosecutors are hoping a recorded phone call between Mr Beale and the woman will convince the jury he's guilty.
In a final plea to the jury, Kirtley Beale watched his barrister unleash on his accuser, with Margaret Kineen SC calling the woman a very good actress. Mr Beale is facing a jury trial after pleading not guilty to sexual intercourse without consent and 2 counts of sexual touching. The complainant alleges the former Wallaby groped her buttocks in a Bondi pub in 2022 and forced her to perform oral sex in a toilet cubicle. But the 35-year-old's lawyer argues the sexual act inside the cubicle was consensual, saying the woman lied about being assaulted. I don't shrink from suggesting that the complainant is a manipulative woman who curated the circumstance of the night to turn herself into a victim. The woman previously told the trial that Mr Beale had followed her into the men's toilet. His lawyer says CCTV shows that the opposite occurred. If it was the old days or the CCTV hadn't been working, we would probably have set in stone the false account that he followed her into the toilets.
Prosecutor Jeff Tunks argued that a recorded phone call between Mr Beale and the woman suggested that the former Wallaby had a guilty conscience. He argued that when Mr Beale was presented with the allegations by the woman, he apologised and made direct admissions to specific acts.
Mr Beale's lawyer says her client's guilty conscience is due to his infidelity and has nothing to do with accusations he committed a serious criminal offence. The trial continues. Ethan Ricks, ABC News, Sydney.
Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister has urged Australia not to give up on his country during an historic address to federal parliament. James Marape is the first Pacific leader to speak to a joint sitting of both houses, but the visit comes against a backdrop of rising regional tensions and looming political chaos in PNG. Here's Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jetchitz.
New honours for an old friend.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea.
James Marape made history when he faced a packed lower house.
I welcome you to the House.
But he kept one eye on past legacies.
This is truly a historic moment for my country.
Almost 50 years ago, Australia shepherded PNG into independence. Now both countries are fashioning a framework for a new relationship.
Neighbours and mates, partners and equals.
But the backdrop is troubled. Just last month, Port Moresby was rocked by looting, and Australia is still plugging PNG's budget shortfalls.
I ask you, do not give up on Papua New Guinea. We have always bounced back from our low moments.
Last year, Australia and PNG signed a landmark security pact, but China is still pressing to strike its own policing agreement with Mr Marape's government, closely watched by Canberra.
These autocrats who use the carrot one day and the stick the next have a complete disregard for sovereignty.
January's unrest has also sapped Mr Marape's political strength, and he could face a no-confidence motion next week. The Prime Minister's confident he'll survive, but his opponents are unrelenting.
Politics in PNG, we say one day is a long time in politics.
The symbolism of today's address is clear. It's an offer that has previously been reserved for major powers like the United States and China, or to traditional friends like the United Kingdom and Canada. The Australian government is trying to say that it views Pacific nations as top-tier strategic partners in an increasingly perilous world. Facing an uncertain future,
our two countries are stuck with each other. We have no choice but to get along.
And facing it together. Stephen Jurgitz, ABC News, Canberra.
At least 30 people have been killed in bombings near electoral offices on the eve of Pakistan's general election. The Islamic State group claimed responsibility for the bombings in Baluchistan province. Dozens of people were wounded, with some flown to Quetta for emergency treatment. Violence ahead of elections and on the actual day is common in Pakistan, which has struggled to rein in militancy. Tens of thousands of police and paramilitary forces have been deployed across the country following a recent surge of attacks. Community legal centres offer free advice to vulnerable members in our community, but many centres say they are at crisis point due to limited funding and can only help fewer than 1% of people who reach out.
Rachel had acquired a very large loan at a time when she was experiencing domestic violence.
I was signed up to a huge debt under circumstances that the bank should have known were wrong, and things were not okay.
She was struggling to get support.
I had been trying to get help myself for a very long time, and I got put in touch with Caxton.
Caxton Legal Centre is one of the largest free community providers in the country.
Over the last 5 years, we had 150,000 people call us for help.
But due to funding, less than 1% of those requests were helped.
They can't get legal aid, they can't afford a lawyer, and we have to let them know that we can't help.
Australia's 165 legal centres are facing unprecedented demand and funding shortages.
The centres are mostly supported by a combination of federal and state funding.
We need at least $125 million additional per year to ensure that centres are able to start meeting demand.
A spokesperson for the Federal Attorney General says a review is underway into how future arrangements can provide better access to justice. Queensland's Justice Department says the state government is working closely on that report, expected later this month. Free legal advice led to Rachel regaining her financial freedom.
I never have to worry about that debt ever again. I never thought I would find someone who could actually help me.
With thousands still waiting. Sarah Richards, ABC News.
To finance now, and the local share market rose again today while the Aussie dollar held steady. Here's Alan Kohler.
The share market has now gone up 11 of the past 14 trading sessions, so while the first 2 weeks of the year were rubbish for share traders, the next few weeks have been great. Today's standout was AGL Energy after announcing that profit had quadrupled to $400 million. Slightly awkward after Alan Fells accused the electricity industry of price gouging yesterday. Not us, said the company, and we spent $35 million helping vulnerable customers. Speaking of price gouging, the ABS has produced some cost of living indexes which showed that the hardest hit are those with a job. The cost of living for employees went up 6.9% last year, more than the inflation rate of 4.1% and much more than those who aren't working. And this chart shows where most of the problem is: housing. The average cost of housing for employees per week has increased 14.5% in 2 years. Meanwhile, China's statisticians announced today that consumer prices there fell by 0.8% in January, continuing 4 straight months of deflation. So their cost of living's fine, except, of course, too much deflation and you're in serious trouble. The Chinese share market went up on the news following gains in New York and Tokyo. Oh, and one more thing about the matter of prices. Look at the cost blowout of the Reserve Bank's renovation of its headquarters in Martin Place, Sydney. From the initial estimate of $260 million to $500 and now $850 million. That's obviously why interest rates have gone up so much. That's got to stop. Iron ore and oil went up while copper and silver fell, and the Australian dollar is steady at just above 65 US cents. And that's finance.
To sport, and ACT Brumbies back rower Rob Valentini has been awarded Rugby Australia's top honour. Valentini was awarded the John Eales Medal in Sydney last night as the best Test player for 2023. The 25-year-old was a consistent force in the Wallaby side, which had its worst World Cup performance in history, crashing out in the group stages. He was just one of 2 players to feature in all Test games last year. Valentini finished well ahead of Angus Bell and 2-time winner Marika Korobete in the final count. He says winning the medal for the first time was a bittersweet feeling, but says it is a boost ahead of the new rugby season.
I use it as motivation to try to do better, not only for myself but for my teammates as well. And for Australian rugby as well, to put it in a better place.
In the A-League women's competition, Canberra United is hoping to build momentum from last week's upset win when it plays the Glory in Perth on Saturday night. Canberra's confidence-boosting win against Melbourne City at home was as close to a complete performance as it's had this season. It was a big improvement from its last game against Perth in November, where Canberra was defeated 3-2. Since then, Perth has only won 1 of its last 8 games, and although United is feeling positive, a long flight, a late start and forecast scorching heat will present some challenges. Coach Njegoš Popović says the team will do all it can to prepare.
All they can do is hydrate, rest, make sure their food is up, and it's just rest. So that's all you can do, and how your body reacts is we'll see how it happens on the weekend.
In cricket, a dominant display from all-rounder Marizanne Kapp has helped South Africa defeat Australia in a women's one-day international for the first time. Kapp made 75 as the tourists set the home team a rain-revised target of 234 at North Sydney Oval. Kapp then tore through the Australian top order and finished with 3 for 12. Australia was dismissed for 149 and South Africa won by 84 runs. The Proteas trail 6 points to 4 in the multi-format series. Australian captain Mitch Marsh is expected to take part in tomorrow night's T20 clash against the West Indies in Hobart, despite testing positive to COVID-19. Marsh participated in training at Bellerive this morning ahead of the first of 3 T20 clashes, with the reigning Allan Border medalist still likely to take the field tomorrow night, albeit at a safe distance from his teammates. Tomorrow night's match is Australia's first T20 international on home soil since 2022. Wicketkeeper Matthew Wade says it's the perfect tune-up opportunity ahead of an away series in New Zealand and then the World Cup later this year.
Yeah, continue to create bonds and try and win games leading into the World Cup. But yeah, we'll find out a lot about a few guys pushing, to make the 15. It's an exciting time.
To the weather now, and there were some spectacular clouds around parts of the capital region today, and Simone Reynolds captured this shot at sunrise from Sutton Park just across the border, while at nearby Bywong, Teresa Nugent took this. Thank you both. Now, the mornings are glorious at the moment. It was 14 at the airport and 15 in Tuggeranong this morning, and it was a relatively mild day in the end. Our top was just 23. Inland, Wagga got to 29, Cooma 20, Perisher 18 and Moruya 24 degrees. In the capitals, Brisbane reached 31, Sydney 25 and Melbourne just 22. On the satellite, you can see there's some high-level clouds stretching from the NT down through New South Wales. There's a little bit of low-level coastal cloud as well. And on the synoptic, you can see a second southerly surge, which will move up over parts of our region over the weekend. Tomorrow, Brisbane could get a shower. 27 degrees is likely in Sydney and 22 on the way for Melbourne. In our region, there could be a little bit of cloud about Nowra and the Southern Highlands, but it should be mostly sunny elsewhere. 25 degrees forecast for Merimbula, 18 for Thredbo, 30 for Yass and 25 for Batemans Bay. Here in Canberra and Queanbeyan, it will be another fresh start. Just 9 expected at the airport early, but it'll turn into a sunny and pretty warm day, 28 our top. Sunrise is 25 past 6 and sunset is 9 past 8. And looking ahead, the weekend should be dry. 24 expected on Saturday and 26 on Sunday. And that is the latest from the Canberra newsroom for this Thursday evening. I'm James Glenday. It is always lovely to be with you. Stay with us now for 7:30 with Sarah Ferguson. And until next time, Yarra, good night.